Stuart, I will let you do your job now. I will leave the stage. Enjoy the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to stand so I can see you all, and thank you, Alice, for that presentation. It would help, I think, to have a bit of a show of hands. Who is currently trying to raise finance? And keep your hands high so we can just sort of see. And let's go for, if you keep your hands up, but drop them if you're raising less than £250,000. And if you're trying to raise more than £1 million. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff. And can I ask how many of you have tried to raise finance in the last 12 months? And those for whom it was straightforward? And would you raise your hands if you said it was really impossible and you gave up at some point? So it was. So there you are. So it was not easy, but not totally impossible. And just one final show of hands for us. How many of you have already got outside investors in your business? So quite a few of you know the joys of having raising money from friends, family, professional investors. Question for you all, first of all, are there specific challenges that creative companies face when it comes to raising finance? Is the creative sector special or different? Jenny first.
Yes, thank you. I actually have seen this quite a bit because I've worked very much with investment readiness with companies. And I think there are certain things. First of all, I think many of you really, really love your businesses and you are very, very attached to your businesses. And so one of the things I often see is a sort of reluctance to come forward and ask for equity, knowing that that means you're giving up a little bit of that business to the investors. And I think the second thing that I've seen is you don't ask for all the money you need. It's one of those big things that, I have to tease that money out of you. I thought it was a very interesting thing how not many of you were asking for more than £1 million out there. You were all asking for not very much. And the question would be, is that because you don't want to do very much? So one of the questions is really, actually I do find is that businesses often are reluctant to come forward, but when they do, not really asking for all the money you need to really take your business forward and grow it. So I would say those are two big starting points. And I think the third thing really is often it is harder for creative businesses to just generally identify who they should be asking the money from, and really understanding whether it's angel investing or venture capital, understanding where to find us. So those would be my three observations at the moment.
And Alice, picking that up, would you agree with that? Is that did you spot a particular in the way the bank analyzes the marketplace that's an issue?
Yeah, no. One of the things is that the creative sector tends to be rich in intellectual property and light on anything that's considered a secured asset. So, not much factories and that sort of thing. And so therefore, for example, the most common form of finance is a bank loan. That's just not going to happen if you don't have something to secure on. And even a very well-established creative company, usually, even when you're very successful and you're generating cash flow, you may not be able to tap into that because you haven't got that. And so I think Creative England commissioned a piece of research which showed that creative companies genuinely get declined for bank loans, and a lot of them just don't even try. And it's a function of not having a lot of security to offer a bank, and that is a failure of the banking system to deal with what is increasingly common in our economy, which is less security, more intangibles.
Mm-hmm. So not much security of asset, being ambitious in raising money from outside. Does this ring true with the two investors, the equity investors here, David and Simon? David first, and give us a flavour of. You're specialising in the creative sector, so how many plans do you see? How many people do you meet? And how many times do you actually?
It's an interesting question when I'm asked about the specialness, if you like, of the creative industries. You know, the starting point for me is that I'm really passionate about helping creative people with business acumen to make great creative work and enabling creative entrepreneurs to have success. And it is a special industry. It's a broad industry, but it's special. But I think it's special in lots of good ways as well as negative ways. And some of the good ways are that it's one of the few industries where you can make content cheaply at a local scale, but then distribute that content internationally. I mean, the marginal cost of serving a video to an additional user is effectively zero, and you can effectively reach everybody who's online around the world. And we've seen earlier today how Facebook have connected 2 billion people through Facebook, 1.2 billion through WhatsApp and other stats. So I think this is an opportunity, an industry with an opportunity for huge amounts of scale. In terms of how much we see, I think we see approaching 1,000 business plans a year. Certainly, I would say in excess of 800. That's an awful lot of reviewing for us. But the number that we actually meet is far less, because one of the problems with the creative industries is a lot of entrepreneurs are not investor ready and come to us before they're really at the right stage to come to a fund like ours.
Right, and we might pick up investor readiness a bit more. But Simon, for the same for BGF, for just a sense of the scale of both your analysis of whether creative companies are what special issues they face, but the scale of the investment.
So I can't break it out specifically for the creative sector, but we will look at about 1,500 business plans a year, meet 500 companies, and invest in 10 to 15, right? Yeah. It's a tough game to start with, I think is the message there. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to triage quite quickly who you think you should meet, who you shouldn't meet. And that's, and you know what? People get it wrong, right? There are some amazing companies that didn't get funded, and that's important. The challenge is, and I suppose, given my background, I'm partly poacher turned gamekeeper or gamekeeper turned poacher, whichever way you look at it. Dark side is often how it's described where I am now. But I think what's important is that you're stood in front of people, or when you're presenting in front of people who actually don't have any reference points as to what's going to make success and what's going to make failure. And I think people tend to think about, this is my experience set, this is my mind model, this is how I can make it work. And if it's tech, I understand how platform works. If it's SaaS, I understand how that works. But if it's creativity, how do I assess the creative idea? I mean, I used to, when I at Unilever, did a lot of advertising. Trying to assess what is a good advertising campaign versus not is really hard, right? And you have to try and work through it. And it's the same in trying to understand creative industries and what's going on there. So you therefore look for things like, what is the track record of the person who's presenting to me? What is the passion and drive they have behind their idea? Are they anticipating the pitfalls that they're likely to come out of? And it's a bit like early stage or venture investing or angel investing, as we've talked before, which is it's a hits business. You'll get most of your return from a few companies that do exceptionally well. And if you overlay that, some people just can't calculate that risk profile. There, I think creative industries are on the back foot. Yeah. But actually, the likes of games industry, the likes of VR, AR, the likes of those other things, I'm hoping will help bring it back into mainstream investing. And that then, I think, becomes an exciting opportunity, because you'll have more ambassadors, you'll have more advocates for it, and you'll have more examples of where people can invest.
Jenny, do you think that given the appeal that Simon set it out, what's the appetite amongst angel investors for, quote, creative industries, creative businesses?
Thank you. I think, as I said, I work with 15,000 angels, and if I were to ask most of them, what do you invest in? Do you invest in creative industries? And I just said it like that. Most of them would say, no, I don't invest in creative industries, too flaky, I don't get it. I find them very difficult to know, as Simon was saying, what the end game is. But actually, that's because that terminology, I think, is carrying a lot of baggage for you. And so actually, when you you start to then describe yourself as a games company, or you're into, VR or AR or you're, whatever it is you're doing, then we look at it as an opportunity then, and we look at the application and we think about it from a very different way. So that's one of the first things, is don't put that on your deck. I'm a creative industries business. But I think most importantly, it almost does say what we've just really been talking about, which is that I don't think there are enough people with the background in the different areas of creative industries who are themselves business angels at the moment in the community. And so you've only got a very few companies like Edge where you've got that depth and level of experience. Out there are people who are definitely interested in what you're doing, but what you want is smart money. And so you really want people who understand the industry. You're not just looking for a pool of capital. You want to have people who can really help your business and help you grow and make all the right connections, but also understand the market. So understand where this business can go and what kind of help and finance it needs. So from my point of view, I think at the moment that is one of the challenges that you have as creative industries businesses, is that the majority of you standing up in front of a group of angels will have the majority of those angels not necessarily getting your business. And we definitely need more people from the industry to come forward. So we've got a lack of investor readiness, let alone investment readiness potentially among the businesses. So I think that's an issue. And of course, once we start to segment that industry, then we will find people who've got the right backgrounds in games or in immersive technologies or film and fashion and design. But if I just were to look across the board, I would say at the moment, your big challenge is there's not enough people who get your businesses when you're standing up and pitching in front of us or sending us your deck.
Which is ironic, really, isn't it? Given that angel investors came originally out of the world of theatre and film.
Well, yeah, that was a little while ago. And
I know,
and
but that's the very it's a language.
Yes, and obviously you've got to remember we've got to set aside some of the things like film investing, which has a very different model attached to it from schemes. Your big thing is getting over the fact that you're not about projects, but you're about being a business. And one of the challenges is you often present to us as being projects, and we immediately go, oh, don't invest in projects, invest in the business. So I think, actually, if I were to be perfectly honest, I think many creative industries businesses have done really well on crowdfunding platforms for that reason. But I think it's still tough in my community to have enough people who understand your business. So I'm on a bit of a mission on that one as well.
David, Living Lens, because you've come into the business as it's growing on its growth phase. But just give us a quick snapshot about Living Lens, what it does, and where it is in its growth journey at the moment. Because
yeah, that's right. So I joined the business 6 months ago, and it's been running for just over 4 years. Excuse me. So Living Lens helps businesses use video within market research at scale. And so we work with 16 of the top 25 market research agencies in the world and a lot of the top brands to help them use video, which is becoming more and more on trend to really get closer to the customer. And that's what video does best. Pitch over. I think in terms of my perspective coming in, we're going through the gears. I think Alice mentioned it earlier about going through the gears, the ecosystem, and that relay race. Sometimes there's a bit of friction in the handing the baton over, and that can be quite challenging. And we hear it all the time from businesses like ourselves. And we talk, and they'll say, "Look, you're too late stage for them, and you're too early stage for them, and you find yourselves in the middle." So I think that can be a challenge.
So give us what's the size of the business at the moment?
So we've raised £2.5 million funding to date. We're just closing a founding round at the moment. So just at the end of that. And we're at the stage, the next gear we're going to is we've got the product. We're getting a lot of traction in our businesses, getting like a 5x growth year on year. And we've just going out to America. We've got 40% of our revenues from America. And we've just put a team in Toronto and New York to grow that. And so from here, and it's about execution and delivering on that.
But the original funding you had was through Creative England, wasn't it?
Yeah. I guess maybe that's why it put me on the stage. But it's Creative England have been super helpful because I think the ecosystem doesn't work as well as it maybe could or should, and there's been a lot of new funds that have come into the market in the last year to put more grease, I guess, on the battens. Where Creative England have been really genuinely helpful to us is that they've been able to kind of morph themselves and change and become a different type of funder. We needed a different type of funder 2 years ago to what we needed a year ago. We need a different type of funder now, and they've been able to take one hat off and put another hat on, which has also been very helpful as a signal for new investors coming in, that you're getting that follow-on and that support. Not really talked about follow-on investment so much, but follow-on is just so crucial because the cost of going out to fundraise is huge. So if you can get investors in that can write the next check and the check out thereafter, that's super helpful.
And is that something that you, in a way where you've now, as the money you're raising at the moment, has that been a crucial part of who you are going with to invest in Living Lens?
Yeah.
The depth of their pockets for future.
Yeah, you go out and and the first question is, well, who are your investors and are they following on and they're supporting it? You have a name like Creative England. I agree with you on the point about we don't describe ourselves as creative. We say we're in market research. That's the sector we're in. But having a Creative England on there is incredibly helpful because of it gives that signal and the fact that they're kind of supporting you again because they know your business inside out. So that almost puts the first mark in the sand and gives you that validation point that allows the other people to come through.
David, do you always, all the investments, do you always follow on?
We rarely invest in a business where we don't intend to follow on, certainly. I mean, not every business will require follow-on capital, but you shouldn't start something you can't finish. The size of our fund means that if some businesses grow exponentially and want to raise huge rounds, then we're not naturally the right investor. But I think David's point is important. New investors coming in will always say, are your existing investors in? And I think it's important that if you believe in a business, you're prepared to follow it through.
Yeah. We did touch and talked about investor readiness, and what does that mean, Alice? If you were saying it's great, it's a very sensible sort of phrase. You've got to be investor ready, but actually, practical terms, what does that mean?
So the word business case gets bandied around a lot, and business case means many things to many people. But what it really is about is that you as an entrepreneur have really thought your pitch through, your business through, that you really understand, how you're going to generate value, where you're going to, what are the challenges, how you're going to deal with it, what you're going to need, what's going to happen if it doesn't go to your plan, what's your plan B, what's your plan C, and basically it's then putting all that in one place in a nice way so that somebody who's new to your business, which is, who doesn't know it as well as you do, can read it, understand it, query you about it, and feel ultimately confident in putting money behind it. Yeah. And investor readiness means that you do have to have a comfort. I think flaky is a little unfair, but it's probably...
I was saying what the investors say.
That is, yeah. I mean, and I think it's probably useful to sort of, deal with some of these stereotypes, in the face, right? The stereotype is you're flaky, you don't have your numbers, which means that you've got to be twice as good and get your numbers down cold, right? And I don't mean fancy sort of modeling and whatever. Just, that the numbers are there and you've given some thought and you can say, why is it this number and why is it not? And that it all hangs together, okay? So when we talk about investment readiness, sometimes it's just basic hygiene things like that, yeah? Like for time is a wonderful thing because people will say, well, this is what I'm going to do for the next year. Well, what happens after that? What's the plan after that, right? Oh, I haven't thought about it. Anything could happen. Yes, I know anything could happen. Can you give us some, break it down for me, right? What does good look like? What does, not so good look like? And what are you going to do? Yeah,
Yeah, yes, I got Simon.
This is an industry that is absolutely fabulous at storytelling, right? That is the basis upon which we build a lot of the things in the creative circle. And at Love Film, spend a lot of time getting the story right in terms of what we were trying to communicate to investors and how that worked. And, it was simple things like, we can acquire a customer for X, the customer stays with us for this long, this is the types of films they like. And we know that we had this program called a retention program, and we called it Hotel California, right? Which is essentially you could check out but never leave, right? and we did some analysis behind what drove it, and we told that story to investors, and we engaged with them, and we could use that as the basis of how our business model and how our plan was built up. And I think it's using the same discipline, structures, and analysis and preparation that you put into your own stories that you're telling about each of your business is absolutely critical. And if you're engaged, passionate, understand the numbers, can communicate what you're trying to do, and understand your real point of difference, that already puts you ahead of 50% of the people.
Oh, by the way, ask for help, right? I mean, you don't have to do it all yourself, and there's a lot of help out there. And I mean, I just talked to a bunch of biotech PhD scientists who, are totally cool with numbers, and they struggle with the same thing, right? Like, they've got the science down cold, and they can't have a commercial discussion. I mean, it's the commercial stuff that we're talking. Like, how are you going to make money off of this? Like, why would anybody pay for this? How much is it going to cost you to make it, right? And so I'm going to tell you the same thing that I tell sort of, PhDs with brains the size of the moon, which is you need to find complementary skills to come in with you so that you can do the creative and the tech and the really groundbreaking stuff as well as the commercial stuff. And sometimes it means getting along with people who might not be exactly from the same background as you. Yeah, and that'll make you stronger. Diversity really makes you stronger.
David.
I'd actually like to tie together a few of these comments that I think really resonate with me. So a little bit like Simon, I'm an entrepreneur first who's come to investing as a second career. So I've walked in the shoes of entrepreneurs, and everything's different for everybody, but you begin to understand the process. One of the things that I think is incredibly important to tie something that Alice was just saying together, and Simon and Jenny, is get help. Mentors are incredibly valuable to people in businesses, and angels are often fantastic mentors in the early stage of a business, and often in the later stages of a business. We often invest in businesses where an angel or an organisation like Creative England have invested earlier than us because they found the business earlier, they're able to invest earlier, but they bring some discipline, some skill sets, some guidance, some general mentoring that launches the business on a much better path. And sometimes we find angels struggle with the creative industries largely because they have a valuation issue. They don't know how to value creative businesses. So they believe in them, they like them, they want to back them, they want to be part of them, but they don't necessarily find the box they can put them in where they have done with technology or real estate or whatever it may be. But actually, those same angels maybe don't have that piece of the set, but often bring a wonderful skill set, some great relationships, and really help launch a business. So I think looking for mentors, looking for help, bringing the skill set together, being a team is incredibly important.
I was just going to say that I think one other part of this is that it's very important to remember you don't have to have all the ducks in the row when you approach investors, because often what you're looking for in that money you're asking for is actually to build that team or to add those extra dimensions of help. So I think it's very important to be very transparent, very clear, very honest when you approach what you bring to the table and what you don't have yet, but understanding what you need to make yourself fully commercial and fully successful. I think that's very important. But I would just add the other thing in my observation is you tell a wonderful story, but actually quite often you do hide your light under bushels. And one of the things that you will find many other entrepreneurs will do that I still think many creatives don't, which is to really tell us how fantastic you are and all the achievements you've had and all the amazing traction that you have, because somehow you're trying to measure yourself against other things, but actually to help us really understand you, to really know you, and to talk fully about all that you've achieved, very often against very considerable odds as a creative, to build that business is something that really grabs our attention. and not to be afraid to kind of show the person, but show your gaps and show your needs, and be, being that human part of it. In fact, that's often what we love, and often the bit we miss when we meet other areas. So that's something just to bear in mind.
David, in terms of investors, the investors you've been raising the money from at the moment, other than the money, what are you looking to get from them? What's the
money.
Smart bit of them?
more money. No, I think the money is, and I we can say the money is absolutely crucial, and it's the right type of money that can help us get to more money and bring more money with it. There have been, I think, what's been really helpful is actually piecing people together who have got money in, which is really important. The difference between people who've got money in your business to the people who are advisors, and I've been in business, we don't need any more advisors, but people that have got a vested interest and you've got money there, and you see their true colours in maybe in the tougher times, are super. It's really, really helpful, because what they've done for us is that you go to the challenge, and 90% of the time they say to us, "You're fine, just crack on," and that gives you that confidence to keep going, knowing that 10% of the time they'll steer you right. So I think there's a lot about confidence within the business, and giving that support to keep going, and to have people that will stay with you for the long term. And I think the one thing I'd add to all of that is we need to work harder at it, but to make sure that confidence goes throughout the business, and the understanding of what does good look like within the business. I think one of the challenges that we have is that we don't see many successes around us. And maybe they are there, but we're too British about it. I don't know. Yeah. But I just sense that maybe permeates within the business, because then not everyone else can see actually what does the end game look like, and the potential for what this might be. So some more storytelling. It's really helpful.
Simon, it reminds me of one of my own mentors who once said to me, "David, it's not about the money, it's about the money."
Sorry, that thing about case studies, though, is very important. I mean, it's the big thing we lack, is that we don't have enough of those case studies of success and exits out there that you can measure against and that we can measure against. And there has been, I think, a lack of those case studies and a lack of role models. We haven't got enough of people around us.
Just one quick thing to add on. One thing that we found that helps for us is finding from angels or businesses that hunt in packs, because there isn't that maybe awareness of the sector. If you can find people in packs, actually, we found they often look to one person who says, "Oh, that's good, I understand that." Yep. And that, again, it's all about getting that to stick to and bring that through.
Simon, I was going to talk about, therefore, you talk about packs, you talk about how that works. And I think that comes to the point of how does this work across the whole of the UK, and how do the regions come into play? And I think you need a critical mass in an ecosystem. You need angel investors. You need investors, who don't just have Oyster cards and travel around zones, and get out about and meet people. And I think that's really important. And what you try and do is Scotland and Edinburgh in particular, after the FanDuels, after the Skyscanners, what happened is a lot of those people then went, created new businesses. There's real energy, there's a buzz, and that's working. In Cambridge, after ARM, those sorts of models, actually, we need to get out there, and we need to begin to help create those ecosystem all the way through, so you can pass a baton from the very start to, I don't know, a public market or a big exit or whatever. And some are more advanced than others. And
so location does have it makes a big difference. Where you are, it makes a big difference in how much money you can access.
And a lot of people if they want to meet somebody face to face and they're based in Newcastle, they don't want to have to get on a train for 3 hours in order to have a face-to-face meeting or a board meeting and makes that work. A lot of people do, and I think that's great. But I also think we need to ensure that a lot of the initiatives that we've got going on in the BBB. BGF has 13 offices across the UK and Ireland, and that proximity means we can work with companies where they're based and what they're doing. Yeah.
I might add, though, 65% of angel investing is in the Golden Triangle, London, Oxford, Cambridge. And so if you are an entrepreneur in Leeds or Manchester or Newcastle or Bristol, it's still very tough for you to find local angels anyway, let alone local angels who will know about creative industries, businesses. So, this is something that I'm sure Alice will say more in a moment, but that is something that, you do battle with as an entrepreneur, and we do as an association, is that we still don't have enough people who get it, who get angel investing and get backing entrepreneurs outside these major areas. So
and I've got half a minute. We have got
Alice
half a
will say
minute,
something
and
then.
I'm just wanting to check that anybody's got any questions.
Yes.
Lady here, yes, please come on.
This is a question for Jenny. When you were talking about when you're pitching and you say sometimes there's a problem with it being more project-based rather than business-based. If you could talk a bit about that, what it looks like
Yes.
when that is pitched to you.
Yes. What we're looking for, as we've talked about, is a business that we can see the business model and see how that business itself is running, creating revenue, but also where it's going as a whole business. We back a business, but very often when you approach us, and we know it's often because that's how you fund things, you're often having to fund a project. So it might be the next film, it might be the next advert, or it might be the next design. And so you're looking often at I need it for that thing. But what we're actually looking for is for you to show how you're going to really build a business, build a team, build a business model that is sustainable and that's scalable, and that you understand how to run and grow a business. We understand that the underlying business might well be on projects, but it's very often happens that it's the project that gets pitched to us rather than the business, and that we can't actually fund that project in its own right like that. So it's something to be very wary about when you're coming towards investors.
I'm mindful. I'm overrunning now. We are overrunning, but there is one other question. That is it.
Do you think that with the refocusing of enterprise investment scheme money away from de-risked schemes, that there's going to be an opportunity with a lot of that money available to deploy properly as it was intended, potentially in creative businesses and others?
Yes. I mean, my team was actually involved in that analysis. It's for knowledge-intensive businesses where a lot's going into R&D. Now, the definition of R&D is, malleable a little bit, but typically this sector, because it's so heavy in intellectual property, should actually qualify. And by the way, the money is use it or lose it. You've got to deploy. The VCTs have to deploy within 2 years, and there will be people trying to seek this out, but that doesn't mean that they won't hold to standards, because they want their money back too. But we designed it to try and help precisely people like you.
So, positive note, more money coming into the sector if you know how to present your business case and you ask for enough of it.
Oh, can I do 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay.
What am I to do?
Yeah. No, so
Lady
basically, the point, what we're talking about, for those of y'all who didn't follow that necessarily, is the UK government gives massive tax breaks to rich people to basically, if they put their money into a high risk investment. Okay, it can be as much as 70p on the pound, right? And we then, the BBB, will actually double that up as well. So if there is a lead angel, somebody who knows what they're doing, and they bring in a load of other sort of angels with, and they present to us, we can say, okay, you've put in, call it £50,000, we'll put in another £50,000 too. Assuming that there is that lead angel. So the thing is that we are trying to encourage clusters of angels, particularly outside of London, notably in places like Bristol and Manchester and so on, because we want people to play nicely together, because it's always more powerful that way. That's it.
That is it. You've heard from some of the smartest investors in the creative sector, and it's not even the creative sector. It's whatever you best describe it is to get the money. So David, Jenny, Simon, and Alice, thank you all very much indeed.